He was convicted of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, securities fraud, commodities fraud, and money laundering. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison and ordered to forfeit $11 billion. He was the center of one of the most notorious white-collar crimes ever committed in American history. They call him the Bernie Madoff of crypto. It is time to talk about Sam Bankman-Fried, the rise and fall of FTX. My name is Henok. This is Pantheons podcast, a business education podcast where you and I get together to study the crypto greats, the crypto leaders, the biggest names in crypto. And in this particular episode's case, the greatest villain in all of crypto. And the goal is to simply extract lessons and principles from their lives, from their stories that you can use in your own work. Charlie Munger once said that learning from history is a form of leverage. And he's right. When you study the greats, you become great. Which is why Pantheons is a study in the history and the biographies of these pantheons and greats. That's exactly what you and I are doing here today. Now, I'm going to share quotes and highlights, stories that I found interesting and valuable from the life and the story of Sam Bankman-Fried. My primary source material is Going Infinite by Mike Lewis. This book was written by a guy who spent over a whole year with Sam Bankman-Fried as a shadow, looking at documentation and the journey of the growth of his particular companies, and getting insider access to the man himself as well. Thank you so much for subscribing. Let's deep dive into the story of Sam Bankman-Fried and the downfall of FTX. Now, before I jump in, I do want to give a little bit of a disclaimer. I am not here to lionize. I am not here to make a hero out of Sam Bankman-Fried. This guy was a villain, extremely controversial, engaged in unethical acts and criminal acts. And so, although we are not here to celebrate or condone everything that he did, there are a few things that his company did that, we could learn from. There are a lot of bad things that he did and his company did that we can certainly learn from as well. So I just want to highlight that. Let's deep dive into the episode. Sam Bankman-Fried. SBF, as he is commonly known, was a loner. Growing up, people would say that he was maybe autistic, that, he really struggled to interact with other humans. Empathy was a big problem for him. He really struggled to connect emotionally and relationally with other people. He was socially awkward to the power of 10. He did develop, though, a philosophy at the age of 12. He was known for, sitting around the table with his parents, discussing philosophy, really deep thoughts, really deep philosophical works with adults, friends that they would have over at the house. Now, going into college, he was accepted and went to MIT. He's a gigabrain. Sam Bankman-Fried was and is till this day a gigabrain. Although socially awkward, did not struggle with numbers at all. But the problem was he began to lose interest, and so he eventually dropped out. He thought he might become a professor at some point, but decided against that. Now, during his college years, he did pick up a philosophy called effective altruism. It's this idea of using your money, mathematically speaking, to maximize the health, the productivity, and the overall well-being of humanity. This man wanted to use money to save people, to impact their lives. It's a quantitative, hyper-rational, emotionless view of life, of philanthropy in particular. And that's how he wanted to deploy capital. He was autistic. And so, it doesn't surprise me that he would maybe figure mathematically or quantitatively with regards to how to impact humanity. And so he saw dollars, he saw income as a way to make significant impact at scale. This actually, his way of thinking really reminds me of a quote that came out of Ashley Vance's biography on Elon Musk. So when talking about Elon, here's what Ashley would say. I would argue, however, that Elon's brand of empathy is unique. He seems to feel for the human species as a whole without always wanting to consider the wants and needs of individuals. It's this by any means necessary type of mentality that Elon certainly has, that Sam Bankman-Fried had as well. Very little empathy for the individual maybe standing in front of him, but a huge heart, a huge, desire to impact and make a lasting impact on greater civilization and humanity as a whole. Now, he went to a job fair and ended up working at a company called Jane Street Capital. It was a high-frequency trading firm, a quantitative trading firm. And so he used that giga brain, that quantitative brain of his, to really do an exceptional job. He worked really long hours but he did an incredible job at this company, making them a ton of money, and he did really well. In fact, here's a quote on his time at Jane Street. By the end of the day, it was clear that it was by far the best I'd ever done at anything, really. And so he's finding a ton of success at Jane Street. He's deriving some level of fulfillment and really developing an insane passion for his time at trading at Jane Street. He was making a ton of money. In fact, by his third year, he was on track to attain a $1 million bonus. But over time, he began to lose interest, maybe get bored, despondent even. I'm going to give you a quote from his journal that gave us a little bit of an insight into this time at the end of Jane Street. He said, I don't feel pressure. I don't feel pleasure, he wrote one day, late in his Jane Street career. I don't feel happiness. Somehow, my reward system never clicked. My highest highs, my proudest moments come and pass, and I feel nothing but the aching hole in my brain where happiness should be. To truly be thankful, you have to have felt it in your heart, in your stomach, in your head, the rush of pleasure, of kinship, of gratitude. And I don't feel those things. But I don't feel anything, or at least anything good. I don't feel pleasure or love or pride or devotion. I feel the awkwardness of the moment enclosing on me, the pressure to react appropriately to show that I love them back, and I don't because I can't. Very dark words. I'm not sure if he was suffering from a bout of depression. I don't want to, be an armchair psychiatrist, but he seemed to really be struggling towards his third year at Jane Street. Let me give you another quote. Sam had committed his life to maximizing happiness on earth without feeling any of his own. Between the summer of 2014, when he started at Jane Street, and the summer of 2017, he had taken no vacation. He actually worked 10 days when U.S. markets were closed. And so on the Jane Street books, he had actually taken negative vacation days. So he grinded like crazy for 3 years, a ton of success at this firm. Summer of 2017 hits. He finally decides to take a vacation. And it was during that time that he discovered Bitcoin, that he discovered crypto. And what he saw was a fast-growing, emerging market, an opportunity with very little competition as it relates to professional trading firms, right? And to me, this makes a ton of sense because his background had been nothing but success in a quantitative trading firm. So that's the lenses by which he viewed this opportunity in crypto. Here's a quote. Sam did a back of the envelope calculation. If he could capture 5% of the entire market, a modest number by Jane Street standards, he could make $1 million a day or more. Here's a quote from one of Sam's buddies, college friends, during this time. Before he left Jane Street, he told me with a high level of confidence, I could make $1 billion. And I said, no way, you are not going to make $1 billion. SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, displayed the highest level of self-confidence as it relates to what he wanted to do in the crypto market. This actually reminds me of a quote from David Senra, the founder of an incredible podcast entitled Founders. And I would highly recommend that you go listen to it. If you listen to Founders, you'll see a lot of overlap here at Pantheons. Here's the quote. If I had to distill everything that I've learned about the history of entrepreneurship, the great founders of history, they would combine Kanye West levels of self-belief with the work ethic of Kobe Bryant. So this idea that Sam Bankman-Fried sees the crypto space, says to himself, I'm going to make $1 billion. I'm going to make millions upon millions upon millions before he'd ever done anything even close to that. It just displays an unreal level of self-belief in what he could do. It's very common amongst the Pantheons. I could go down the list of all the greats that have spent time before they ever did anything, imagining, visualization, believing in what they're capable of doing long before their resume or the history books ever documented ever happening. So Sam starts a quantitative trading fund called Alameda. He decides to step into crypto head first, and he wanted it to be different than Jane Street. Here's his quote. The work felt familiar. It was the same sort of research in crypto for Alameda that was being done at Jane Street. But Jane Street, as Sam put it, was just a place where people come to work each day to play some games and increase the number in their bank account. Because what else are they going to do with their lives? Alameda Research, as he was calling the new firm, was going to be different. A vessel to save some vast number of lives. There it is again, that philosophy of effective altruism, using money to better humanity, to save lives, as Sam Bankman-Fried would say. And I'll tell you, these are kind of the two motivations that drive SBF throughout his career, throughout the founding of the two major companies that he's known for. This idea that he wants to make a ton of money, and number two, use that money to advance civilization, money and fulfillment. This reminds me of an Elon Musk quote. He says, life has to be more than about solving problems. It's got to be something inspiring, even if it is vicarious. So SBF is not alone in starting Alameda. There's a guy named Gary Wang. He's the co-founder. He actually coded the quantitative trading system and all the software, the websites. That he's really the geek. He's the tech behind Alameda and all of Sam's projects, FTX as well to come. And we'll talk about that here shortly. Here's a quote on the early days of Alameda. The firm's finances were already in a state of chaos. They had started small a few months before with the $500,000 left over after taxes from Sam's Jane Street bonus. But within a few months, they had persuaded other richer, effective altruists to lend them $170 million to trade crypto. They had lost millions of it already, though how many millions, no one could say for sure. In February, their trading system had lost $500,000 per day. On top of the trading losses, some additional millions had simply vanished. No one seemed to know where the money had gone, but the employees were in full panic mode. So even in the early days of Alameda, right, they've got over $170 million, and yet in the early days, they're taking L's. Some of the money is missing, and they're losing in real time. Here's another quote. Amid the turmoil, Sam's attitude toward the missing money was, it'll probably turn up somewhere, so let's keep trading. That lackadaisical, that laid back, not concerned, not handling the details type of perspective is something that pervades SBF's life. So at this point, the Alameda's management team were really getting sick and tired of Sam, his antics, and they were looking at having him removed. There's a story in the early days of Alameda where the firm somehow, some way, under Sam's purview, under SBF's purview, lost $4 million worth of a crypto called Ripple. And his response was the same. Not worried about it. You know, there's an 80, he even said this in the book. He said that there's an 80% likelihood that the money will turn up at some point. So we might as well tell everyone, right, whether it's employees, customers, the public, that 80% of it is here. 80% of it is available. That we should consider 80% of it in our hands. Just a absolute unwise, foolish way of thinking and approaching what we would consider a crisis. $4 million in crypto that's missing. Here's a quote from an article on SBF that really highlights this type of perspective that he engaged in. Bankman-Fried's error was an extreme hubris that led him to bite bullets he never should have bitten. So in the same article, there's a quote about, they kind of gave SBF a scenario. Scenario number one is there's a 51% chance that you can double the earth, double the size of the earth, the growth, the health, all the good things. Or a 49% chance that it all just disappears, goes away. Civilization is dead and gone along with the planet. What should we do? And Sam's response was, I would keep playing the game continually. And his hope is to win the game. His goal is to, see the earth doubled over and over. So just a very, very, very foolish way, unwise, unhelpful way of really viewing the world. And that exposes his risk tolerance. I want to introduce the philosophy of Kelly criterion into this particular episode. It really explains a lot of SBF's decision-making calculus. So the criterion was coined by John Kelly, and his work helped Ed Thorpe in the 20th century with regards to stock market trading, which is a very new concept in the 20th century. And for those of you that don't know, Ed is worth over $800 million. And so this particular principle actually helped Ed in building his net worth over time. Here's a quote. The core of John Kelly's philosophy of risk can be stated without math. It is that even unlikely events must come to pass eventually. Therefore, anyone who accepts small risks of losing everything will lose everything sooner or later. The ultimate compound return rate is actually sensitive to fat tails. So the big idea is this. No matter how small the risk is of losing everything, you should never be in a position to go all in and risk everything, even if there's a tiny percentage that you could lose it all. Even if it's a 0.1% chance, never be in a position where losing everything in one swing is even a possibility, because eventually, over a long period of time, that's exactly what will end up happening. Here's another quote. Having an edge and surviving are two different things. The first requires the second. As Warren Buffett said, in order to succeed, you must first survive. You need to avoid ruin at all costs. So don't risk everything. Don't be in a position where you could potentially lose everything in one swing. And that's exactly what SBF put himself, his company, his customers, his employees, his partners. He put those people in that type of position all day, every day. Sam was also remarkably prideful and arrogant. Let me give you a quote. Sam was resistant to the idea that someone was going to tell him something he didn't already know. This man reeked with pride. Could you imagine being in a position where you actually feel like no one on this planet could say things that could add value or help in any way, shape, or form, or in any area in life? This was Sam. In fact, he was so bad, he refused to read books because he felt like he didn't have anything else to learn. He thought books were stupid. As you can imagine, being under this type of leadership caused tremendous friction between SBF and his management team. And so they decided to make a push to get him out. The problem was Sam, SBF, owned 100% of Alameda. So what happened? They left. The management team turned over. About $1 to $2 million in severance was distributed. About half of the entire workforce, half of Alameda, the company, walked out and quit. The investors reduced their capital, right? The capital they once had was over $170 million. That got reduced down to $40 million. This period of time where management walked out, capital allocation was reduced by a great multiple, half the employees walking out. They called it the Great Schism. And the employees that did stay really had no clue what was going on. They didn't understand the details. They didn't understand every aspect of the business because Sam and the team did a really good job of compartmentalizing and hiding different things that they were engaged in and doing. So during this time, people were complaining about SBF's management style and the way that he led his team. So here's a quote on some of his leadership. And he wanted to create some systems to help his team. So here's the quote. In the end, he decided there was just one change he needed to make in himself, to become less off-putting to others. Even the people of whom he most approved, he had complained that he needed to become more approachable and offer more constructive advice and be less negative. So SBF wanted to be liked. SBF wanted to empathize and connect with other humans a little bit better, right? We talked about how he struggled with that his entire life. Maybe it has something to do with, his autism. I don't know. But the point is that he got to a place in leadership where he began to pretend to agree with the people standing in front of him, even though deep down inside, he wouldn't agree with decisions or perspectives that were being brought to him on a regular basis during this time. And that right there reminds me of a quote, an interaction between Steve Jobs, Johnny Ive, who was Apple's chief design officer, and Johnny Ive's team. The story goes like this. Steve walks into a meeting. The team had been working hard on a project, and Steve goes ballistic, rips the team apart. He expects and demands the best of the best, and he felt like the team wasn't delivering. So Johnny Ive, the head of that team, decides to pull Steve to the side. Here's how the interaction went. Could you tone it down a bit next time? And Steve replied, I'm disappointed in you. I didn't think you were vain. I thought the quality of the work was more important to you than other people's feelings. So there's a great lesson there to be learned. Sam Bankman-Fried began to nod his head and agree with things that he didn't agree with. And Steve Jobs, on the other hand, had no problem engaging in warfare with his team in order to get his points across and build a superior product for his customers. Now, I don't want to lionize abusing people. Steve Jobs was known for completely berating, really not being emotionally intelligent and hurting people with his demeanor and his words. So you contrast Steve with John D. Rockefeller, right? The man who built effectively America's first $1 trillion company in today's dollars. And he was ruthless, competitive, a predator, a monster when it came to his opponents, when it came to those in the media that criticized him, and especially with those that try to compete with him in business. Yet, he was kind, he was gentle, and they even said he never raised his voice when it came to his employees. So he was a lion in the streets, but he was a lamb when it came to his own home, when it came to his own business. So two different ways. Now, John D. Rockefeller, he didn't capitulate. He didn't acquiesce. He butted heads all the time with people inside of his team and his employees as well. But he never raised his voice. He was never overbearing. He tended to be very logical, calm, quiet, relatively speaking, and certainly found a way to disagree in agreeable ways. So two different ways that we've seen Pantheons engage with other people as well. You don't have to acquiesce and just nod your head if you don't believe or value what's being said to you. But you also don't have to go volcanic either. There are wise ways to handle other people, and that's what we can extract from this moment in Sam Bankman-Fried's leadership. SBF decides to move to Hong Kong, move the company to Hong Kong. He wants to also make more money. So Alameda is making some money, but he really wants to make a lot more money. Remember, his goal is effective altruism. Make as much money as you can and deploy that capital to change humanity for the better forever. During this time, he began to pitch to Hong Kong investors, potential investors, and of course, as he's going down the list of all the people in regards to a brand new company and launching a brand new company, he connects with CZ Binance, episode 2 of Pantheons. You can study his story. He was and still is to this day a crypto giant. And so he approaches CZ and he offers $40 million in exchange for an equity stake in a futures-based contract business. And so the idea is he wants to launch this thing called FTX, which is, again, a futures-based exchange idea. CZ decides he wants nothing to do with SBF pre-launch, and it's actually kind of funny. CZ stole the idea and began to implement a futures-based exchange within Binance behind Sam's back. So Sam doesn't get CZ's investment, but he moves forward and launches FTX. FTX was a crypto exchange, a place where you can buy crypto, sell your crypto, or simply hold your crypto on the exchange. So customers would come, they would deposit their Bitcoin, deposit their crypto of choice into a wallet that FTX ultimately had custody over. And it was a great, easy, simple to use website and platform for you to buy, sell, and hold crypto. And his promise to his customers was simple. For every $1 in crypto that you deposit in our exchange, we will back that with $1 worth of Bitcoin or Ethereum or just straight up cash. So we have the reserves at any given time to give you your cash back should you ever decide to take your funds to another exchange. And that was the birth of FTX. Let's get into some of his hiring practices. Here's a quote. Most of the people who went to work for Sam Bankman-Fried ended up in jobs for which they were not obviously qualified. And Natalie Tien was no exception. So a Pantheons principle that we see across time is Pantheons hire effectively. That doesn't always mean that they hire the most qualified candidate. And by that, I mean these arbitrary rules around having a specific bachelor's degree or master's degree or a resume that has, a certain type of experience in order to make you qualified. Pantheons just found the most hungry, talented, and capable people, and they deployed them to work inside their companies. I want to give a quote from CZ Binance. He said, hire the best people, always. You need to be a part of a strong team to win. Passion is one of the most important factors I look for. Hire people who will grow into the role, not someone who's been there and done that. While previous experience certainly helps in many situations and is a prerequisite in certain roles like compliance, the latter will be bored. It also often causes a fixed mindset, as people are often overly molded by their experience. So whether it's Walt Disney, Steve Jobs, James Dyson, the founder of Dyson Vacuums, Sam Walton, the founder of Walmart, I can go on and on with examples. The big idea is they really engage in this counterintuitive approach to hiring, that instead of trying to find a person who's qualified on paper, they want to find someone who has the culture, the energy, the hunger, the drive, and the work ethic to push their vision and their company forward. Here's a quote on the company culture. FTX was different from the other exchanges because the guy who ran it, Sam Bankman-Fried, was different. So you could really say that about any company. The DNA of the founder, the DNA of the leader of the company is embedded inside of the company. Here's a quote from a book entitled Inside Steve's Brain that just comes to mind as I think about this principle. He has made and remade Apple in his own image. Apple is Steve Jobs with 10,000 lives. All right, let's get into Sam's demeanor and the way he carried himself during this time. Here's a quote. Sam's appearance felt less like a decision than a decision not to make a decision. He wore what he always wore, a wrinkled t-shirt and cargo shorts. Often on live television, Sam would not only play a video game, but respond to messages, edit documents, and tweet. Sam was remarkably eccentric. Sam was unprofessional. He wouldn't even iron his shirts. He would be in the middle of interviews with massive media organizations, and this guy is playing video games. The level of unprofessionalism, the level of immaturity, the stupidity, the temerity, the unmitigated gall that this moron, this baboon had. Could you imagine being on CNN and this guy's playing Galaga in the background? Sam, what's wrong with you, man? He's a kid. He's a kid in a gorilla's body. All right. This guy is an absolute moron. But Sam hated bending to norms. So much so that it really became detrimental inside and outside of his business. As the company continues to grow, FTX decides to launch FTT, which is the token representing the value of the company. It's a cryptocurrency. And I'll tell you, it goes nuclear. They launch this cryptocurrency and it goes bonkers. In fact, it goes up so much that CZ reaches out to SBF and offers $80 million for 20% of FTX. And it's unbelievable. So now CZ and SBF are in partnership. So FTX is booming and growing, and they launched their own cryptocurrency, which creates capital and liquidity for them. So now they have a very successful cryptocurrency and a lot of money on hand. But as things go on, nothing good, and really this is so true when it comes to SBF's life. Nothing good ever lasts long. Here's a quote. FTX sold FTT, the token, and used the capital not to expand FTX, but to trade inside of Alameda. It seemed perfectly natural for Alameda to control all the remaining FTT and use it as collateral in its trading activity. Sam didn't even try to hide what he was doing. FTT has single-handedly fixed Alameda's equity problem. He wrote in a memo to employees, he is an absolute dunce, a moron, a fool. He lacks sense, lacks wisdom. Because what you're doing by using FTT tokens as collateral to acquire more capital so that you can then use that capital at Alameda to trade in the market, you're risking liquidation. Because yes, borrowing against your crypto, borrowing against your asset is perfectly fine. Being leveraged is perfectly fine when you're in the middle of euphoria. When you're in the middle of everything going up and to the right forever, it's perfectly fine. But the problem is we don't live in that kind of world. We live in a world where things go south and things go bad. So what happens to your open leverage positions when the value begins to crash. And that's a part of what FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried, for whatever reason, did not take into their calculus when they began to borrow against their FTT to fund Alameda. Unbelievable. SBF's ambition knows no end. He sets his sight on the United States market. Let me give you a quote. The U.S. was now in Sam's mind the holy grail. It had an incumbent crypto exchange, Coinbase. And Coinbase, compared to FTX, was a boring, bloated casino. It had 15 times the number of employees that FTX did, but only about a fifth of FTX's volume. They were charging retail investors fees between 5 and 50 times what FTX charged. It was still running big losses. Even so, it was a public company with a market cap of over $75 billion. So FTX is running lean and mean, right? They are charging, Coinbase is charging 5 to 50 times what FTX is charging. So the competitor is charging almost 50x what you're charging. You're in a better position. Also, your competitor has 15 times the number of employees than you do. You're in a competitive position. Also, your competitor is doing X amount of volume, and yet you are doing 5 times that volume. So FTX was leaner, meaner, and cheaper than Coinbase. Of course, they began to dominate the United States market. If Coinbase had reduced their fees, if they had created a space where there was more profit, less overhead, less employees, they really could have taken FTX down pretty early. But they didn't. And because of that, FTX began to gain insane market share. And to be honest, Sam's hate for formality and bureaucracy was a little bit of an advantage to him because he was moving a lot faster than the incumbent Coinbase during this time. So at this time, FTX was simply an international exchange, but Sam sets his sights on getting established in the US. The problem is regulators hate CZ Binance. You can go back and listen to episode 2 of Pantheons, where I talked about at length CZ Binance's war with US regulators. And so at this time, in order for SBF to compete in the United States, he had to offload CZ Binance. So what did he do? He bought him out. That $80 million that CZ acquired was now worth over $2.2 billion. And SBF agreed. And he handed the $2.2 billion worth of value in the form of cryptocurrency, a currency called BUSD. And of course, you guessed it, FTT tokens. So $2.2 billion worth of FTT tokens and Binance BUSD tokens handed to CZ Binance. And, things were never the same. CZ beefed with SBF from then on. They were never friends. They were never compadres. They absolutely despised one another. And CZ was actually pretty worried about SBF. He wasn't worried about his well-being. He was worried about him as a competitor. He would stalk FTX. He would have employees check in on FTX. They would keep their eyes on the business dealings of FTX. And they beefed with one another. There was a point where Binance was engaged in what they called wash trading. It's where they set up these bots to artificially buy and sell tokens at certain price points. SBF hated CZ as much as CZ hated SBF. So what did SBF do? He created a faster trading bot that would, so Binance's bot would set a price maybe for sale at $98, would buy a token at $98 and then sell at 102, creating artificial volume. SBF's bot would come in and undercut Binance's bot, work much faster, thereby creating a loss for Binance. And it got so bad one day that SBF called Binance, called CZ and said, hey, if you want to stop losing money, you should probably stop wash trading. In other words, I see what you're doing. I don't like you, and I'm going to cause you to bleed. SBF hated CZ, and CZ hated SBF. Nothing could stop Sam at this time. They kept moving FTX forward. So he moved to Hong Kong earlier in his career, but now they decided to move to the Bahamas. The Bahamas were a little bit lighter on crypto regulation and financial transactions, as you can imagine. Now, at this time, FTX had superior technology, a better product for its customers, right? Cheaper fees, they were running leaner, and they were expanding like crazy. But they didn't have much market penetration or brand recognition in the United States. So Sam Bankman-Fried went on a spending spree to change that. For instance, the Miami Heat basketball stadium, he got the naming rights for $155 million. Until this day, at the time of this recording, it's still called the FTX Arena. He would throw dumb money, I mean millions upon millions of dollars, at celebrities for celebrity endorsements. Shaquille O'Neal, David Oritz, Larry David, Steph Curry, and of course the Holy Grail, Tom Brady. These celebrities didn't know jack about crypto, but they sure took that endorsement money and began to push FTX like crazy, which created insane spotlights and opportunity for the growth and brand recognition of FTX over time. At this time, Sam is seeing success. Customer base is growing. People are depositing their crypto at FTX. They're gaining significant market share very quickly. And Sam, for whatever reason, decides to start randomly buying businesses. He bought his friend's video game, a friend from college, a random friend's video game company. He was even willing to invest. This is absolutely ridiculous. He was even willing to invest $5 billion, B as in Bravo, $1 billion in a random Hollywood agent who was looking to start a company. He'd met the guy a few weeks ago, and within a matter of weeks, without consulting a soul, was about to deploy $5 billion in capital in startups. It's startup funding for this random agent in Hollywood. I mean, this guy, the way he operated, he left you with the impression that he had endless hordes of cash to be distributed willy-nilly at his discretion. When other executives caught wind of what he was about to do, they talked him down from $5 billion to $500 million. I can't even imagine giving, forget strangers, $500 million. Family members. I don't know. It's crazy. They talked him off the ledge. And, he just found himself deploying capital in ways and at paces that would just boggle everyone's mind. During this time, he saw Donald Trump, President Trump, as an existential threat, a negative impact on the world. He began to deploy tens of millions of dollars at Democrat candidates to oppose the Republican Party and Donald Trump during that time. Allegedly, there's a story that his team reached out to the Trump team and asked them, what's your number? What would it take in terms of deploying capital to get you out of the race? And allegedly, the Trump team responded $5 billion. And apparently he thought about it. The point is, Sam used capital in line with that philosophy. Effective altruism, leveraging capital for the betterment of the world and society according to his own opinion and perspective. We saw this in the way that he deployed capital in the fight against AI. During this time, he thought AI was another existential crisis and threat to humanity. So what did he do? He emailed as many gigabrains that came to mind in that moment, people that he thought could fix the AI problem, and began to distribute $1 million each to each person. No strings attached. And he would his plan, apparently, was to watch and see what they would do with the million in solving the AI problem. And if they happened to do great things, in his opinion, in solving towards that problem, he was prepared to deploy much more capital. Who knows? Maybe hundreds of millions of more dollars. I don't know. But the point is, this guy, for whatever reason, was just burning through capital at a rate and a pace that would boggle the mind. In 2022, the crypto downturn began. And even during that time, he was spending resources to acquire crypto banks that were failing. Here's a quote from one of his executives. Ramnik recently had asked Sam how much capital he should assume was available for possible acquisitions. And Sam had said, just let me know if you get to $1 billion. They were not watching their costs. They were not handling things with great detail or attention. Just keep buying banks. Let me know if we get to $1 billion. We'll decide what to do after that. Did this guy have endless money? And then the collapse and the dominoes begin to fall on SBF, FTX, and Alameda Research. It all began on November the 6th when CoinDesk decided to publish an article leaking Alameda's research balance sheet showing $14 billion in assets and $8 billion in liabilities. A third of those assets being FTT tokens. So on Sunday morning, November the 6th of 2022, CZ Binance posts this tweet. As part of Binance's exit from FTX equity last year, Binance received roughly 2.1 billion USD equivalent in cash via BUSD tokens and FTT tokens. Due to recent revelations that have come to light, we have decided to liquidate any remaining FTT on our books. So here's what CZ is saying. Last year, at some point in the past, CZ invested $80 million into FTT, right? And in order to be bought out, he was handed $2 billion worth of BUSD, Binance token, and FTT tokens. And now CZ is saying a year later, hold up. I'm looking at FTX's balance sheet. It doesn't look good to me. I'm going to go ahead and start selling my FTT tokens so I can recuperate some of my capital. Because holding on to this asset is not good for the health of my organization. Why? Because they're illiquid. Remember, they don't have, remember the promise. The promise when it came to their tokens were, for every $1 you deposit here, we have a matching dollar in reserves, whether it's cash, Bitcoin, or Ethereum. Those two tokens are considered very stable, very safe, very secure. Now it's very clear that no, that FTT token is not backed by a ton of assets at FTX. So here's the response after that public announcement was made by CZ. On a normal day, $50 million or so either came in or left the exchange. Each day on November the 1st and November the 5th, $200 million fled. By late Sunday night, the 6th, $100 million was leaving every hour. FTX customers withdrew $2 billion that day, and then they tried to withdraw another $4 billion on Monday. By Tuesday morning, $5 billion had exited. Remember, Sam's promise was $1 for $1, right? In order to maintain liquidity. Did he keep his promise? Absolutely not. And this is the crux. This is the reason why FTX completely fell apart. For whatever reason, FTX loaned about $8 billion in customer funds to Alameda Research as collateral so that they can acquire more trading capital. So you take $8 billion of your customers' funds, put it into Alameda. Alameda then takes that money and leverages it to get more capital so that they can use that capital to trade on the market and make more money. And his hope was that he could take cookies out of the cookie jar and hopefully replace those cookies before anyone ever found out. His goal was to replace those customer funds with profits down the road. He's a thief. He stole people's money when he said that they would simply keep the money in the exchanges so that the funding of Democrat candidates for political positions, the money they were using to gamble, to invest in the open market during that 2020, 2021 bull run, the real estate acquisitions that he made, deploying millions of dollars for AI research, potentially deploying billions to Hollywood, all these transactions, all of the money flowing out that we've been talking about all episode long, all of that came from customer funds. He was taking cookies out of the cookie jar the entire time, and chocolate is smeared all over his face in this moment. Unbelievable. Here's a quote. The exchange was clearly not going to be able to come up with enough cash to pay the swelling number of customers who wanted their money back. It did not formally shut down withdrawals, but it more or less stopped actually sending money back to the customers. The company is bleeding. People are leaving. Billions of dollars are flowing out. Money they don't have is being requested from them. Money they should have had in reserves at all times. So, Sam Bankman-Fried's ex-girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, who's also the CEO of Alameda Research, decides to put out a tweet to CZ Binance. She basically says, CZ, she decides to put out a tweet in the hopes that they can calm the crypto market down. Because during this time, and I was in crypto during this time. It was crazy. It's the bottom of the bear market. People have been losing and bleeding money for months at this moment. And the value of FTT is plummeting in real time. And the exchange itself is bleeding because customers want their money out. They want their crypto out of the exchange. And the exchange isn't releasing their funds. So in an effort to stop the alarm, in an effort to stop the red alert, in an effort to calm the entire market down, Caroline, the CEO of Alameda, who everyone knows is connected to SBF, they were dating at one point, decides to send a tweet to CZ and says, CZ, calm down. You don't need to sell all your FTT tokens on the open market. We will buy it back from you at $22 per token. In crypto, we call this an OTC deal, over the counter. The only reason why you do OTCs is so that there's no market impact or impact on the charts that people can see. And this allows the person to get their funds, and this allows the project to maintain some level of stability so that there's not just red candles all over the chart. She was trying to project confidence. So here's what happened. This gets nutty. This counter tweet did the opposite. Within 20 seconds of Caroline's tweet, a rush came to sell FTT by speculators who had borrowed money to buy it. The panic was driven by an assumption. If Alameda Research, the single biggest owner of FTT, was making a big show of being willing to buy a huge pile of it for $22, they must need to maintain the market price at $22. The most plausible explanation for that was that Alameda Research was using FTT as collateral to borrow additional dollars or Bitcoin from others. So what did CZ do? Don't forget, he beefed with SBF. He despised SBF. Is he really about to do FTX, Caroline, and SBF a favor by doing an over-the-counter deal? Negotiating on their terms? Saving the project? Saving the company? Saving the chart at $22 per token? Absolutely not. CZ is a savage. CZ unleashed the hounds of hell. CZ is Genghis Khan disguised as a Asian, brilliant, genius businessman. He unloads his FTT on the open market, putting red candle after red candle after red candle on the charts, thereby accelerating the panic, and everyone begins to sell their FTT token. So what does Sam do? SBF begins to pick up the phone, and he's reaching out to sovereign funds, pension funds, banks, institutions, trading firms, anyone he can get on the phone, him and the whole team. Help. We need $7 billion now. Help. We need $7 billion now. And everyone begins to ask, okay, SBF, tell us, what do you need the money for? He tells them why. Then they ask, what happened to all those customer deposits? Your customers want their money back, right? It's their money. So where did it go? And of course, as SBF would go silent on these calls, when that question came up, the people on the other side of the line would hang up on him. He never got the capital from them. So what did he do? He broke the glass and he pressed the red button. He went to the one person that he despised, the last hope, his only shot at getting out of this hole. The one person he knew who would understand the situation and have the liquidity to actually solve the problem. He went to CZ Binance, of all people. Unbelievable turn of events. They worked out a proposal. A letter of intent was signed, and the agreement gave Binance full ownership of the entire company except FTX US in exchange for assuming FTX's liabilities. It also gave CZ the right to examine the books of FTX and Alameda Research. So CZ inspected the books, and this is what he found in due diligence. Oh, and he sent out a tweet. This not only are we going to discuss what he discovered, he then put it out in the public square so everyone could discover what he discovered in the dark. Here's a tweet. As a result of corporate due diligence, as well as the latest news reports regarding mishandled customer funds and alleged U.S. agency investigations, we have decided that we will not pursue the potential acquisition of FTX.com. In the beginning, our hope was to be able to support FTX's customers to provide liquidity, but the issues are beyond our control or ability to help. The next quote I'm going to read off to you, you're going to hear names inside of that quote. These are the names of the executives at FTX. That's when everyone who hadn't already crept away bolted for the airport. Nishad was speaking more of killing himself. Khan's wife told him that if he didn't leave right away, she would file for divorce. Ramneek, who had thought of himself as a behind-the-scenes guy, invisible to the outside world, was receiving death threats. The employees at FTX lost everything. The customers who deposited their money with FTX lost everything. Employees, partners, investors, customers were their retirements were wiped out. Divorces began to happen, even suicides, because the money that they thought was there was no longer there. And it became very clear to everyone. That afternoon, after everyone was leaving for this is where it gets just even more crazy. That afternoon, everyone began to leave, right? Headquarters, they're going for the airport, they're leaving the Bahamas, they're trying to get out. And someone stole $450 million in crypto, somehow, some way, from the exchange. Many people believe that it was one of the employees on their way out. But here's the bottom line. SBF screwed his customers first and foremost, his investors, his partners, his management team, his employees as well. No one escaped the catastrophic downfall in regards to SBF's horrible, criminal, evil decision-making. There was a woman named Constance. She was the COO of FTX, and she was told that she would own 4% of the company during her time there. And that's what she thought, repeated it over and over during her time there. When the fallout was happening, and she began to look at her documentation, she realized that she didn't own 4%. She owned 100th of that amount, 0.04%. She thought she owned 4% of a multi-billion-dollar organization. So there's a moment where Constance confronts Sam Bankman-Fried at his penthouse. And she's, as you can imagine, right? She thought she was worth hundreds of millions of dollars. She's letting him have it. We'll just say it like that. She's letting him have it. And she realizes in that moment, he's devoid of emotion. He's devoid of empathy. He's really struggling to connect and even understand how hurt this woman had been. His team sacrificed for him. His team gave up their lives. They were workaholics for him. They believed that they were millionaires, that their lives had changed forever. Meanwhile, this man was stealing customer funds and deploying that capital to give himself power, prestige, influence, and a bigger name. FTX goes bankrupt. Sam Bankman-Fried signs liquidation papers, and the Bahamian government seizes his property. The Kelly criterion happened to Sam Bankman-Fried. If there's even a 0.01% chance of losing it all, eventually time catches up with you, and you should never take risks where you have even the smallest possibility of losing it all. He thought he would simply make it back later and put the cookies back in the cookie jar before anyone ever noticed. That is not what happened. And now we are approaching the end. I want to leave you with this. This is a quote. Sam Bankman-Fried orchestrated one of the largest financial frauds in history, stealing over $8 billion of his customers' money, said U.S. Attorney Damian Williams for the Southern District of New York. His deliberate and ongoing lies demonstrated a brazen disregard for customers' expectations and disrespect for the rule of law. Also that he could secretly use his customers' money to expand his own power and influence. The scale of his crimes is measured not just by the amount of money that was stolen, but by the extraordinary harm caused to victims, who in some cases had their life savings wiped out overnight. As a result of his unprecedented fraud, Sam Bankman-Fried faces 25 years in prison and the forfeiture of over $11 billion. Today's sentence will prevent the defendant from ever again committing fraud and is an important message to others who might be tempted to engage in financial crimes that justice will be swift and the consequences will be severe. And that is Sam Bankman-Fried and the rise and fall of FTX and Alameda Research. Just a reminder, Pantheons podcast is basically available on all social media platforms. It is at Pantheons, there's an S at the end, pod, P-O-D, at Pantheons pod. Really would appreciate it if you would follow, if you would subscribe. If you found this episode to be very valuable, share this episode with a friend who you think would benefit from it. If you genuinely believe in the mission of Pantheons and what I'm trying to do here and you think it's valuable, then please, you'll be helping a friend get access to the knowledge and also helping to support the growth of this podcast by simply spreading the word. Copy a link, text it to somebody, send somebody a DM. I just want to say thank you. Thank you for listening or watching wherever you are across the planet. I am sincerely grateful for you. And I cannot wait to hear about how this episode, how Pantheons in general is having an effect on your life and your work. Until next time, I'll see you on social media.